So now let's turn over to the first presentation of the day. To lead us through this, I'd like to welcome Yasay Yetiskin from ICF, who will present some of the key statistics to help us with the sustainable aviation fuel discussion, which is going to be the focus for the first hour or so. Yasa, please.
Thank you, Haldane. Hi, everyone. So I'm Yasay Yetiskin from ICF. So as Haldane mentioned, this will be a very brief introduction or very brief presentation on the key statistic around sustainable aviation fuels, mainly focusing on yesterday, today, and the future. Oops, I think that's probably the wrong one. Okay. There we go. Cool. So I would like to start with re-emphasizing the need for sustainable aviation fuels. So there are quite a lot of studies exploring how aviation industry will achieve decarbonization by 2050. And when we look at all these global studies, we see utilization of a basket of measures, but there's one thing that we see in common is that SAF will provide, in most of the scenarios, the biggest chunk of the emission reduction. So 37 to 70% of the emission reduction in aviation industry by 2050 is expected to come from sustainable aviation fuels. So that means we will need a lot of SAF by 2050. But we have been already working on scaling up this industry. So since the first commercial flight with sustainable aviation fuels in 2008, which was 15 years ago, we have sort of created this baby industry. It is still growing. But the next step, which is very important for us, is focusing on actually delivering the near-term targets that we have ahead of us, the capacity that we have announced. But also in the long term, achieving the long-term success will also require climbing this mountain ahead of us, that's for sure, which will require calibrating the direction and the level of investments to correct or the necessary technologies that will enable utilization of wider feedstocks. So when we look at the progress in SAF scaling up, we see an impressive momentum on the supply side and also very strong signals from the demand side. So the production is currently, of course, very limited, but as you see in the chart, it is increasing almost exponentially every single year. And last year, somewhere around 300 kilotons of SAF was produced and fully utilized, and aviation industry paid more than $500 million additional cost for sustainable aviation fuel. So this represents the commitment of the industry as well. And as discussed earlier, as Jane mentioned, the 5% target set by ICAO with more than 100 member states agreeing on this particular target, which is very impressive. More than 40 countries, again, all over the world, have a SAF policy in place or a SAF policy under discussion. And more than 50 airlines across the world have 5% or more SAF utilization target by 2030. So on top of our long-term targets, net zero target by 2050, we have very strong demand signals for the near term as well. And when we look at the announced capacity across the world, so we see more than 130 facilities under development in more than 30 countries today. And these facilities are expected to provide around 23 million tons of production capacity by 2030. So this is, considering where we are today, a huge scale up. And this is mostly being underpinned by the offtake agreements. So today, there are more than $45 billion worth of SAF offtake agreements, covering more than 40 million tons of SAF through more than 100 offtake contracts. So there is a huge momentum again ahead of us, and we need to focus on actually delivering these targets and ensuring that these facilities are commissioned successfully. But I think there's one thing to emphasize, because from where we stand today, we were trying to scale or create this industry. We have sort of an industry currently, it is scaling up, but the next big challenge is actually scaling up the advanced SAF technologies, because currently all SAF is coming from HEFA, which is a technology, which is a mature technology we have been utilizing for over decades. to produce actually renewable diesel. So today we need to access a much wider range of feedstocks through the utilization of advanced technologies such as alcohol-to-jet, Fischer-Tropsch, power-to-liquids to be able to process waste and residues or even water and air with power-to-liquids. So we need to increase the investments for the advanced SAF technologies. Today it is 100% almost HEFA. When we look at the announced capacity, over 75% is still HEFA, but in the long term, over 90% of SAF needs to come from these advanced technologies. So we need to calibrate the direction of investment to advanced technologies and also increase the level of investments. That was very brief, but the idea was to show that we did this before. We have climbed Mount Everest, we have landed on the moon, so even in SAF industry, we are showing incredible progress. So as long as we stay united and we invest in the right technologies and the supply chain across the technologies, we can also achieve the targets for 2050. Thank you all.
Thanks very much. Well, thank you, Yasser, for those insights. And I just wanted to add to them very briefly, as I think it's really important to acknowledge that those companies taking the lead here. And yes, I mentioned airlines which have forward purchase commitments to SAF, and they're all listed on the slide. These are for 2030.